So yesterday, I'm out at dinner with my homeboy, and he asked me one of those basic questions that makes you kind of go, huh. He said, hey, Chris, you know how you a farmer and stuff, and how conventional agriculture has this problem where it keeps busting up the environment and messing up people's livelihoods. But then there's the regenerative part that you're kind of a part of, but you criticize it because the prices are too high and people can't afford it. So tell me, like, what's the difference? Like, what's going on there? I said, strap in, boy, I'm going to tell you a tale. See, conventional agriculture and regenerative agriculture both have a problem, and it's the same problem. And it's not the government, it's not the regulations, it's not the subsidies, it's not apathetic consumers. No. It's something called the estate model of agriculture. Let me explain. When the melanin challenged people came to this country, there were Indians running it, and the Indians were doing something called communal agriculture. That's where all the land was owned by everybody in a roughly egalitarian society. So they would decide together what would get grown, how to grow it, and where to grow it. Then they would all grow the food together, process all the food together, and distribute it to the community, make sure everybody was fed. They would also make sure there was enough of a surplus, so if there were bad times, there would be enough to eat, and they'd create even more surplus so they could trade with other people that had stuff that they couldn't get themselves. That system is very good for making sure everybody's needs are met, but it's not so good at making any individual person very rich. So when the Pale people came over, they looked over at the Indians. They said, what y'all doing, boy? And they looked back and they said, we taking care of each other. They said, y'all ain't all that rich. Y'all could be getting rich. The Indians said, why would we need to get rich? And the Europeans said, oh, this is going to be an issue. And the Europeans kind of went, and the Indians went. And so Europeans decided to bring a new model of agriculture. They brought that estate model over from where they came from. The estate model is very different than the communal model. In the estate model, the land commons is broken up into allotments called estates that are headed by the head of a household. Traditionally, it's been some sort of male patriarch, but nowadays it's mostly like a nuclear family. These nuclear families own these estates, the purpose of which is to grow crops that are then sold to an integrator that is outside of the estate, and they are the ones that process the food crops and take it to market. Now, the problem with the estate system is that you don't just have one estate, you have all these estates, and they're all competing against each other because, see, the integrators, the ones that are buying all the stuff from these estates, they want the lowest prices they can get, and they reward the estates that get them those low prices. Over time, these estates start doing three big things to get the price down of the stuff they're selling to these integrators. They start mechanizing things so they can create more crops with less. They take animals out of the fields and out of the pastures and start putting them into buildings and confining them. And the third thing is they start doing some stuff that's maybe not so good environmentally. In addition to the stuff they're doing with the animals who are now pooping in huge concentrations in these little teeny tiny places, they're also planting fence row to fence row. They're planting things on hillsides. They're overplanting. They're over farming. So you have erosion and runoff issues. This makes the price of food go lower and lower and lower, but also environmental quality gets lower and lower and lower, and nutrition starts getting lower and lower and lower. And one of the funny things about prices is they were generally going down, but they weren't going down smooth like this. It was more like, and this created discontent with the people. So the government stepped in and said, we're going to subsidize certain elements of agriculture to make sure those prices stay nice and smooth. What that did was encourage a lot more of the other things that people were doing, the mechanization, the confinement, and the environmental abuse. It encourages this, so the prices get lower and lower still. Now, in spite of all the environmental problems, in spite of all the human problems, and in spite of all the animal abuse problems, you had one big benefit, which is that suddenly famine wasn't really a big issue in industrialized countries anymore. You had this one big benefit of cheap, widely available food standing tall amid a litany of all these other problems it was creating. Regenerative agriculture looked at those problems and said, but we got to do something about that. So regenerative agriculture starts uninjecting the things that made food cheap. So they start unwinding the mechanization. They take the animals out of the confinement houses and put them back in the fields, back in the forest, back out in nature. And they start unwinding some of the damaging planting practices. So we try to get rid of monocultures and planting on hillsides, and we start introducing more cover crops and interplanting. But that had a side effect. See, all those things that were being taken out are the things that made the prices do this. When you unwind them, the prices go back like this. And when your prices are all the way back up here, those integrators, the people that were buying your stuff and taking it to market, they're going to say, nah, cuz your prices are too high. We're not buying from you anymore. On top of that, these regenerative people have undone all the mechanization and all of the confinement stuff that allowed a very small number of people in conventional agriculture to produce a whole lot of food. The problem is that over time, when conventional agriculture was mechanizing and making the prices and stuff like this go like that, they hollowed out the agricultural labor economy. People left the country. There aren't that many farm workers anymore. The whole structure of the economy has shifted away from an agrarian economy. So now the regenerative farmer has a problem. They don't have there's no network for them to sell their stuff into, and they don't have the labor base that they need to get their unmechanized work done. The regenerative farmer winds up doing the whole bag themselves. Now, if you've paid careful attention, you'll notice that the root of all the regenerative farmers' problems is the estate model. He or she is trapped in this box trying to develop their own brand in addition to developing their own markets, trying to do all their own work by themselves, competing against other regenerative farmers, also trapped in their own boxes, trying to replicate all the same effort. The most obvious thing for them to do would be to combine forces, to form kind of a blob that acts as one, but the estate has them trapped. They have too much to lose to be willing to trust the other estates to say, let's combine our assets and resources into one big, powerful thing to be a part of. This is why I focus so much on first generation farmers, because first generation farmers don't have the estate. They don't have anything to lose. They only have something to build. So they are more likely to want to get together with like-minded people to create this thing that can actually go after conventional agriculture and conventional agribusiness. Those young and hungry people are more likely to want to do what the Indians did, which is to treat the entire, not only the landscape, but all that processing and marketing and networking and sales infrastructure we talked about before, to treat that all as one big commons that everybody owns together, more or less as equals. When you can get that many people together, working large landscapes together and having the infrastructure necessary to get food out to lots and lots of people, you start having network effects, economies of scale that allow prices. They're not going to go down like this, because this is what conventional agriculture does, and a lot of this is predicated on passing on the cost to the environment, to animals, and to jobs being destroyed. So we can't necessarily make the price go like this, but we maybe can make it kind of go like this. start getting it within range of regular people's wallets. Because here's the thing, people want to be able to interact with regenerative agriculture. They want to be able to buy our stuff, the stuff that's produced the right way, the stuff that can actually feed you and nourish you properly and doesn't require the destruction of the environment. But you can only afford what you can actually afford. You can't will your way into participating. Native people have always been good at adapting European ideas and technology into our own cultural imperatives, whether it's guns and steel, or in this case, profit and private property. And that is the core of what Blackbird is doing to bring regenerative agriculture to the masses, instead of insisting the masses come to us.